And we are live. Welcome to this week's episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I'm here with Rosie Tomkins. She's an author, consultant, a coach, a speaker, and she has a very deep interest in our connection with nature and this idea of natural intelligence, or our NQ. One of the books she's written is Instinctive, which is the one I read in preparation for this show. She's also got a new book coming out called Let Nature Be Your Compass. I can't wait to get into this. I've not heard of NQ or natural intelligence before this show. So I'm always excited by new concepts and ideas, especially if we can apply them to how we live and how we lead. So, Rosie, a very warm welcome from your garden with the birds in the background to the show.
Hi, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here.
It couldn't be a more apt setting to talk about natural intelligence. So for those people who are not familiar with you or your work, perhaps we could start with a potted history of how you came to be where you are today. A little bit of background for our listeners and viewers.
Okay, so my background has always been in business. I'm kind of serial entrepreneur, and during my kind of journey, I kind of brought together 3 different businesses. And in the final business, I sold my company to a PLC, and I was kind of very luckily put into a boardroom situation. And it very quickly dawned on me that in business, we tend to always looking for like 360-degree, feedback forms where we're looking to improve all the time. And I decided that if I ever went into training, I'd turn that on its head and look at celebrating strengths rather than trying to improve on kind of skills that we don't have. And so that led me down a journey of looking at training from a different perspective. And again, from communication side, we tend to always think that communication is about talking. But the reality is, as most people know, 90% of communication is non-verbal. So I kind of married the two together and decided that I would try to run a training business that looked at the non-verbal communication. And as I say, looking at celebrating strengths and using nature as my compass, really.
Right. Okay. And you've got an inspiration in this in horses, right? Your background is polo playing. Am I getting that right?
Well, I wouldn't say it's my background, but I mean, I wasn't brought up in those kind of circles, but I've always ridden. I brought up in Manchester, and I used to steal down to a local pig farm and literally ride the local gypsy horses bareback with a piece of string. So that boded well for my life when I ended up eventually playing polo, because obviously I could ride like a Red Indian. And I hadn't got the training to kind of get rid of. So as I say, a lot of the work I've done in my life has been instinctual. I've actually worked from flying by the seat of my pants rather than going to a business school and learning all the models and, that people do learn in business school. Saying that, during consultancy and things like that, I've also learned how to apply the business models to the natural world. So there's a great kind of combination here of kind of learning these much needed models, but then applying them to the natural world so that it can help us and strengthen us in different ways.
Right. And so when you decided to take this training business, and as you said, non-verbal communication being part of it, but also inspired by nature, where were you looking for that inspiration, or was there a particular event, or did something trigger this particular interest in nature?
So, yes, I mean, I would have been quite cynical in the past about taking business into nature. And I think I had as always in my life, something happened. And in everybody's life, there's a kind of turning point. And I was lucky enough to be asked to go to work with some horses. And to be honest, I thought this woman was completely cuckoo. I thought, why would I be working with horses in the middle of a business environment? And 5 minutes in the arena with a a beautiful 4-year-old stallion with nothing. There was I wasn't riding it. I wasn't wearing a head collar. We were just at liberty together. And her first coaching question was, could you find his potential? And that was quite an ask, because you can imagine to be alone in an arena with half a ton of horse and trying to find his potential. And I struggled, I've got to say, for a little while. And then I had the dawning of what was going on here. And it was this collaboration between the two of us that we had to work on. The leadership and followership, and learning what he was trying to tell me about his ability. And of course, we couldn't talk to each other. So we had to work in a different way. And within 10 minutes, I could see a pattern appearing in the way I work that often frightens people. I'm a pioneer, so I can go quite quickly into situations. And I forget sometimes to tell my team and to communicate with them about what it is I'm trying to do. And that was a fantastic learning for me, because I was just about to go into a merger, or I was just being bought out by a PLC. And it allowed me to reassure my team that this was going to be all okay, and that we were going to work together. And there was obviously going to be cultural differences, but we could very quickly, smooth that transfer over by the experience that I had with the horse in the arena, which is extraordinary.
Right.
And that's where the journey started. And, 3 or 4 years later, I remembered this experience, and I thought, wow, why don't I explore more and do some research and see what's going on here? And I think we were talking earlier, I met up with the mind math people who work in stress in organizations. And they came over and put all the electrodes on me and wired me up, put me under stress by asking me maths questions, and then saw the difference in my stress levels when I was actually out in nature and working with the horses. So my heart variant pattern changed dramatically from being, under stress and then out in nature and working with horses. And I thought, wow, this is something really important.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating, because we've had somebody else on the show, and I think I mentioned this earlier, who's into forest bathing.
Yeah.
And the research they've done there in terms of when we're exposed to the phytoncides, right? These chemicals that trees excrete, and how that reduces our stress level. But I hadn't considered also being in contact with animals. Would have such a powerful impact.
And the science the science behind that is also really important, because I hadn't a clue. But apparently, the heart of a horse is so much bigger than ours. So their electromagnetic field around a horse pulls us into their frequency. So we feel this incredible calm, which now has been backed with science. It's not just woo-woo. So that's really exciting as well.
Well, isn't that interesting as well to consider that for so long, in terms of our human evolution, I mean, right now we're in this sort of these endemic levels of stress and depression, anxiety, and so on across society. But we're also at a time in society where we've never been less connected from nature and had animals in our lives. You think about historically how much we would have been around horses, just to name one animal, as well as many other animals all the time. And now that's very rare for us, isn't it? It's interesting to consider.
Yeah, and I think people assume we assume that we go out in nature. We go and take the dog out for a walk, and we forget that we actually are nature. We are animals, but we're just a different species. And that's really, really important. And this kind of disconnection, as you say, this move away, into an illusion of separation, is really causing us a lot of grief as the human race.
Yeah, yeah. And something you wrote in the book, which struck me just as you were speaking, was that how if we observe nature, we don't see animals stressed about where's their next meal, what's going to happen tomorrow. They have this trust in that the environment will provide, or seemingly, right? I mean,
Again, I think, we wake up in the morning and we look at our problems and our situation and our challenges for the day. But animals in the wild wake up in the morning to face more daunting challenges than we can ever imagine. They've got to find food, they've got to find shelter, they've got to find water, and they've got to stay alive. And as you say, they seem to do that, trusting that they have everything they need inside them in order to do that.
Yeah. And I suppose applying that message to your team going through a merger made a big difference.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. So to zone on this term then, NQ. Yeah. Could you talk about, what's that defined and how we distinguish it from IQ, EQ, and spiritual quotient, which you also mentioned in the book?
Yeah. So again, it's very difficult for me to be taken seriously if I go into a boardroom and start talking about nature and horses. So I wanted to find something that really encompassed what I was trying to get across. So, we all know about the IQs. We know that, IQ is really important for the job you do and the attributes you need. We know that EQ is now very, very vital within teams. Some people know about SQ, spiritual quotient. But for me, it's this natural intelligence, the NQ, that seems to be missing. And I talk in my book about business being a three-legged stool, and we need to make it a four-legged chair, because that NQ is really the positive use of your instincts, insights, and perceptions, which allow you to make decisions at speed from a place of deep knowing. So when I do that and I talk to people in business, I always give the example, or I'll give lots of examples, but one of them that seems to resonate is the story of the Hudson River landing with Captain Sully Sullenberger. I don't know whether you remember that.
That's right.
Yeah. This amazing pilot was in difficulty coming out of New York, and he was told by the control tower to turn the aircraft round and to land back at LaGuardia. And he, in his moment, decided, with all his experience, with all his learnings, all his skill and everything, in that moment, he used his NQ, natural intelligence, to land the plane on the Hudson River, and obviously saved many, many lives by doing that. And that's an example of where you're bringing together all those intelligences to make that very, very quick decision. And I say we all have that within us, but it's been layered and layered with lots of kind of politically correct stuff that stops us doing that, and we tend to just come from a thinking place rather than a knowing place.
Right. And which then begs the question, how can people, I suppose, identify what level of NQ they have and also work to develop their NQ?
Yeah, so as I say, it's everybody's got it. So another example, which I love, is a friend of mine's a doctor. She was struggling with a patient who had mental health problems, and the patient was really kind of, upset and distracted, and they were not really knowing quite what to do. And then a nurse comes in, who obviously, with all their experience and their wonderful kind of attributes, and she's just stopped everything and she just sang a song. And the patient then immediately was relaxed. Now, that's not in a textbook. So what is natural intelligence is all that learning that comes from you, from your experience, and is not learnt in a textbook. And that's what I'm really championing, is please go back to yourself and believe in yourself and the strengths you have within you, and that will serve you and lead your life that you want to lead, rather than being distracted by all the other stuff that goes on, of being like someone else or following someone else's code of ethics or all those things. Just learn to believe that you have everything you need inside you.
Right. And I understand that this is going to be a theme in your upcoming book, Let Nature Be Your Compass, around validation. Right.
Yeah.
And that sound, we spoke before the show, that was a strong theme. And it seems like you're talking about that here, and NQ versus seeking validation.
Yeah. So again, validation again is something that we're not always aware of. It's internal and external validation is so important. And, many of your listeners will have children who are really looking at external validation to create their confidence in their own ability, whether it's, exam results, or whether it's getting ticks on Facebook, or, they're growing their whatever it is, their friends on whatever it is. And I think we've just got an epidemic of people who are looking down. I call it the looking down generation, who really need to be looking within, because all these young people have got everything they need inside them. They don't need to follow anyone else. They just have to gain confidence in their own ability to lead the lives they want to lead. And I'm really concerned that they are losing that, and they're always looking to be validated by someone else or something else. And that's one of the themes in the next book.
Mm. And how do we then come into our own power? How do we connect with our natural intelligence?
So again, I believe that it's all to do with nature. I think that everybody, wherever they live, can look outside the window and look at the sky, or whether, the moon, or whatever it is, or and look at how nature works with all sorts of challenges, even like the common spider that people are so frightened about. They are such a wonderful architect. They build these incredible webs. They take hours and hours. Resilience is what they're showing. And we walk through a gateway that they've just built this incredible web and sweep it to one side without a thought. And this poor spider has to then come back and rebuild its web somewhere else. And to me, that shows incredible resilience of this little creature. And it's everywhere in nature. Whether it's the learnings are incredible, just the emperor penguin, the amount of what would you call it, hardship that emperor little penguin has to go through to even to keep its egg alive, and to bring it through, to bring a new generation forward. And that inspires me every day. The way animals have these extraordinary, qualities to keep going in situations of incredible stress. And also, like communication, we can learn a lot from just simple things like the bees. Again, I didn't know until my mother told me about the waggle dance of the bees, and I thought she was having a joke. I thought, how can bees dance? And then I looked it up, and I realized that they communicate by dancing. So again, how extraordinary that, that is part of nature. And it goes on and on. All animals have different attributes that they share, and we can learn from.
And I know that when you work with clients as a coach, you're using horses, right? And this is one of your access points into nature. And so can you share a little bit about that work and the types of things you do and the impact that has?
Yeah, so it does seem very, very strange. I mean, I don't use horses all the time. I call them my partners. So it's just horses have the most incredible qualities. For one reason, they're a prey animal. So we're predators, obviously. So what fascinates me is their propensity to come back from stress and to want to be with man. So that is one of the things that I think is really important, that they seem to want to serve us and have served us for many years. As you said, during wars, they provided transport, they've provided ploughing fields, etc. But the horse has also this ability to help man and to, as I say, want to serve them in some way. And to me, that's absolutely fascinating. They act as a mirror to what you bring. So because they're not talking to you, they're watching your energy all the time. And they are reading that 90% of non-verbal communication. So when I'm working with people, I can see what they're bringing to the world by the way the horses are reacting. And that is, you can bring fear, obviously. You can bring great qualities of humility to a horse. But whenever I'm working, there are three things that are incredibly important that the horse needs. One is that the horse needs to feel safe because we're a predator. It needs to trust you, and it needs to know who's leading right now. And that, I believe, is the same for man. When we meet each other for the same time, your first three kind of questions you're asking are, am I safe with this person? Can I trust you? and who's leading right now. And that's the important qualities that the horses bring. And they give this incredible kind of opportunity for insight, which brings about exceptional learning.
And you've got a story in the book, I think, about a Pakistani businessman who worked with you. And I was really touched, actually. I'll be honest, it made me cry when I read that story. Yeah, tell us a bit about that experience.
And I find that amazing. You know, a lot of men are touched by that story, and it does make you cry. Again, it was. I like to work. What's the word? It's always bespoke. I can't. It's not a kind of a carbon copy or a jigsaw or anything like that. I like to work with people in different ways, and whatever their challenge is, I try to build it around what I call a context. And in this particular occasion, I don't know why I went completely off brief. And we worked on leadership and feeling leadership rather than seeing leadership. So I had this idea of maybe blindfolding him and taking away his visual capacity in order for him to feel what leadership was. And so, you know, the poor chap was dragged around.
Good on him for going with it, right?
He had to
Your
trust
typical
me.
training course.
He certainly had to trust me, had to feel safe. But the main thing was that when we moved, he didn't know I was going to take him into an arena with horses. He was blindfolded. But when I laid his hands on top of the horse, something incredible happened. He wept, and he stood there shaking and weeping. And, you know, he's given me permission to talk about this because it was massively important to him. And then afterwards I said, would you like to talk about it? And he said, absolutely. You know, my life as a child was around nature. I was brought up in, you know, the foothills of the Himalayas, and nature was all around us. We had dogs, horses, and everything else. And now I'm in London. He's a very successful computer guy working in an office in central London. And he hadn't realized that this huge part of him had been lost. And he was feeling very unhappy the way he was feeling, very successful, made lots of money, but had this sense of something missing. And it was this connection with nature. And he hadn't really picked up on that, as we all do. You know, we're all busy working hard. And we forget that there has to be some form of balance. And this is what happened to this guy. And he went back, he left me after about an hour. He was meant to be with me all day because he'd had this amazing insight and applied it to his business and his life. And it changed his life overnight. He was able to delegate all the stuff and then allow himself to have that space to be creative in nature.
Yeah. I mean, what a story. And sometimes I suppose it takes that visceral experience that touches deep down emotionally to get that strength of insight that's then going to transform your life, right? We have to go often very deep. I find that in my own work, right? If you can get to the depth, you can get that transformational insight, which isn't just like new knowledge. It can move mountains.
And it happens all the time. You know, the clients I work with are not always told where they're coming. You know, it's up to the CEO to allow them to know where they're coming. And obviously they are told before so that if they have any allergies or things like that, we keep them safe. Because people make up stories about, you know, what a waste of time it is to be outside the office and in nature. What am I doing here without my phone? I've got all these important people trying to connect with me, and I'm standing in a field with a horse, and they don't give themselves that wonderful time that we all need just to have for themselves in order to recharge them, to re-nourish them, to bring them back to life. And that's what I find all the time. The resistance is often there in the beginning. What am I doing? And then afterwards, it's like, oh, wow. I'd completely forgotten that you know you can learn so much from the natural world.
Yeah. And I think what's different as you speak is that we do sometimes have they've almost become a little bit cliched, right? Where you go outside and maybe you've got obstacle courses to go over, or you've got some challenge with barrels and planks and rope, and you've got to work as a team to. But which is like in nature, or at least it's
Mhm.
outside. But
Yeah.
those activities aren't asking you to connect with the natural world, observe the natural world, get
Right.
curious about what you can learn from the natural world. Almost as we talk now, it feels like a lost opportunity with some of these sort of outdoor oriented experiences.
Yes, because we very rarely, the great thing about working with the horses is you get to see how others see you. It's not about doing tasks.
Mm,
It's not about completing tasks. It's not a competition. But you suddenly have an awareness, this incredible awareness of how others see you. And that to me is the beauty of it, because we can't see ourselves, obviously, and you can't fake it when you're out in nature, because those three things apply. The horses immediately read if you're faking it. So they know that, if you are scared or whatever or nervous, you're not congruent. It's easy for me then I always say I'm a bridge between what's happening in nature and what's happening in business. And then I can apply it back into the business environment. And those insights are their own personal insights. Nobody's telling them what to do. They have those insights, and then they apply it back in their own business. And that's the important thing as a coach, not to put these ideas in people's heads, to actually allow them to feel them. Um, and I say the animals, the horses are just absolutely amazing. And we know that stress in the wild is a natural way of being. But we need to, from the horses, you learn about boundaries, how to approach a horse, how horses see the world. And again, then we can apply it straight back to our organization, where we have lots of different characteristics, people who need different things from us, and it gives us much broader knowledge and a bigger toolkit to work with.
right. Yeah, I can understand how it would have this expansive quality, right? Because you're exploring in different dimensions. And yeah, the broader the toolkit makes a lot of sense to me. Um, you talked about the new book coming up. I don't know if it's in the new book or you were just mentioning it as we were talking about it, but tell me about worm casings.
Well, this is new news to me as well, actually. I know they say you learn something every day, and I was chatting actually to an electrician whose son is following a path of, into research and science, and he's looking at all kind of different experiences in the wild. But this worm casing is very exciting. It's a bit on the lines of the naked mole rat. I don't know whether you've heard of the naked mole rats in my book.
Yeah, no, I've seen that. It's extraordinary, aren't they?
And please, if you don't know about naked mole rats, look them up, because they have these incredible qualities. They are completely immune to cancer. Did you? I don't know whether you knew that.
I
And
knew that. Yeah, no,
yeah,
that was one of the, and they live. They don't age, do they?
they live till about 30. And the thing that makes me laugh so much is, I would say they're quite ugly. I mean, that's a terrible
Mm.
thing to say. Their
No,
teeth,
they are ugly. Yeah.
and yet, they are loved by many, and they're loved by each other. So that makes me think about judgment. It brings us into, humans are so quick to judge what you look like, what you're doing, all of these things, what job you do, what title, what car you drive. And yet animals are all come in all different shapes and sizes and colors, and they find each other, and they find each other attractive, and they bring different attributes. And I think that, again, something like the naked mole rat has brought all sorts of steps forward in science. And it seems that these worm casings are doing the same. There are some incredible healing properties in worm casing, which they're now exploring. And I just feel, again, we all know the difficult situation with our environment, and all of these things are going to be lost before we can actually discover them. And they're there for us to find, and I hope they'll be there a lot longer.
So I'm now intrigued because I was saying I've got a wormery in my garden, and I've got a lot of worm casings, which is basically just worm poo, right? It's
Yeah,
just a
yeah,
nice way of
yeah,
saying
yeah,
worm
yeah,
poo.
yeah.
And I'm now wondering, should I be giving myself, some casing, masks, face masks, worm
I don't know.
casing.
I mean,
Anyway,
I'll have to go back to the scientists to find out what they're actually
or,
finding.
or do you put a teaspoon in your coffee? Um, So again, so in terms of it, we've talked about validation and you know the looking down generation, and it's about looking within, connecting with nature. That's a theme in the new book, Let Nature Be Your Compass. Are there any other strong themes you want to give a teaser of for people who might be intrigued?
So again, who's the book aimed at? I think is an important question, isn't it? And that's define your audience is what I'm always asked. But I think the book is about people anybody who's looking for something uplifting and thought provoking. Um, it's a business book in some ways, but it's also a personal book. It's about your own leadership journey, leading the life you want to lead without being told by others how to lead it. But also, it's a book about learning about your team. If you have a team in business, how to understand them better, how to get your best game to the table, and also if you're running a business, about how you can strengthen your own ability and your own confidence in your leadership ability going forward. Because even if you're, leading a massive organization as a pioneer, the doubts are there. People think that you, as a leader, are always sure exactly of what you're doing and where you're going, but the doubts crop up and you start to question your own ability. And hopefully that will strengthen people to look outside and to say, I can still do this. Look at what's going on in nature and all these incredible stories from nature and metaphors to kind of support them on whatever their journey is.
Mm. And you strike me as being somebody with immense confidence, right? You've had this extraordinary success, as an entrepreneur, and now becoming an author and so on. What what have you relied on to bolster your own confidence? What do you think has made a difference for you personally, Rosie, in that respect?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's you start to realize what has always been there. And as I say, as a little girl born in Manchester, I didn't come from a family of people that are in nature or looking to connect with horses. But from that very early age, I found something outside in nature, and it happened to be horses, that brought me a sense of kind of everything's going to be okay, the confidence to try things and fail, to be who I was, because animals are who they are. They're always on purpose. A giraffe doesn't try to be a snake. They stay with what qualities they have, and they have this deep belief, as you said at the beginning, that is the trust that everything's going to be okay. And once you can kind of lean on nature in that way, and looking at in winter everything shrivels and dies, but there's always a spring. Spring blossoms, the trees come to life again, and even on the prairie, it can look like there is nothing there, and then suddenly wildflowers appear. So no matter what you're going through, if you can look to nature as your kind of crutch, in a sense, to pull you through, I think that is where I get my strength from, and I hope that others will too.
That's beautifully put, and I like that it rests on just, well, rest is a good word, right? But it's sort of relaxing into everything's going to be okay. It's not just necessarily about pumping yourself up and trying to sort of put something on yourself. It just, everything's going to be okay, and that's a foundation of confidence. I love that message.
I think that's why we love dogs so much. We're a the UK is a dog loving country, and people get immense pleasure, don't they, from their dogs? And
Yeah.
it's that reassurance that they're getting all the time from the animal, that you are acceptable to me, that you come through the door and they love to see you, and that whatever mood you're in, or whoever you are, they love you unconditionally. And that's why people, I believe, have dogs, because they're
Mm.
not being judged. There's no ego. They don't care, as I say, what car you drive, how much money you've got in the bank. They just love you unconditionally.
Yes, that's true. I mean, I'm thinking back to the dogs I had as a child. Yeah. I think I experienced that. Now I reflect on it. Yeah. And you're right. We are definitely a nation of dog lovers, the Brits, aren't we? I read something recently about a Spaniard like living in Britain. I just couldn't over how many dogs there were, like everywhere, even in the towns, right? You would
Yeah.
say, in Spain, in the countryside, you might have a few farmers with dogs, but, with Brits, there's dogs everywhere, in handbags, yeah, everything. Um, Great. Is there anything, Rosie, we've missed? Anything we've not touched on that you'd like to speak about?
Well, there's so much I could talk to you about. I could talk all day about what I love and the nature connection. I think, as I say, for me, there's an element of self-judgment. I mean, we cannot, as humans, get away from this continual self-judgment piece. And again, we wake up in the morning, we think, oh gosh, I'm losing hair, or does my bum look big in this, and all these horrible things that we're aware of. And just to say that nature doesn't do that.
Yeah.
It doesn't see, it has, and sometimes it would be lovely to be an animal, as in a wild animal, because they don't have all this self judgment going on. They just are on purpose. They're there to do the job that they were born to do, and so are we. And to let go of all that judgment is a massive message for me from the world around us. And that inspires me greatly. And as we get getting older, and all of those questions, it doesn't matter who you are, what religion, what color, what creed, what you look like. It matters what you have within you and what you're here to do, what you're born to do. And that's what I find, as I say, I see every day from a natural perspective. So I hope that is a message that people can also hear.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, I
And
love
I
that.
give an example of that. A little story. Have you got time, Richard, for a little story?
No, we've got all the time in the world. Yeah.
So when I was lucky enough to sell my business into a PLC, they bought me lock, stock, and barrel. And I was, as you can see, I love colour. So I kind of walked into this organisation in my lovely bright clothes and my wacky ways of being. And they bought me for my creativity and my kind of, I suppose, my difference. Yeah. And within kind of 2 or 3 months of being in this organization, guess what happened? I felt very threatened by everyone else who was wearing these beautiful suits, and they were all grey and pinstripe suits and black suits and things. And, it makes me laugh now. So I was feeling a bit vulnerable. So I started to wear them as well. So I started to wear pinstripe suits as well, just so I could fit in, into this environment,
Yeah.
and to be like others and to kind of not stand out. And that was, it took somebody, actually a coach of mine, to say, well, the whole reason that they bought your company is that you are different. So for you to then suddenly try to, dull your light, or, to dull yourself
Yeah.
down to fit in, is not bringing any benefit to anyone. So, it was a real lesson for me just to be who you are, and to continue being who you are, because that's what they needed from me, that kind of difference, bringing something different. And in my work at the moment, I see a lot of politically correctness, and I challenge that all the time, because, again, how does that serve an organization if you're always politically correct? I'm not saying that, we should be rude to each other. Absolutely not. I'm about respecting everybody and everything. But fundamentally, if we don't step up and show us something, lead when we know something to be right, with the organization, the people around you are missing out on something special. So being passionate and actually speaking out is really important. And especially in an organization. And I work with them to change their leadership perspective with the horses, so that they move from this kind of politically correct version of themselves to who they actually are. And that's a
Mm,
massive, massive insight, that they have to, try different leadership styles. And they do that with the horses, try these different leadership styles. Then they find out who they are, what's their innate leadership style, and what is appropriate to the organization right now. So again, for me, that learning is really important. Know who you are, not saying fake it till you make it, absolutely not, and saying, know what your innate leadership style is, but then learn how, if it's appropriate, you might need to change for a short while. Does that make sense? So, again, if an organization is in a startup mode, you cannot really be collaborative because you've got to move at speed and make decisions at speed. Doesn't mean you have to stay there because that's exhausting, but you can move around different leadership styles so that you're quickly able to adapt to what the situation requires. And I think that's also a really important thing.
And how does that relate to the idea that you present in the instinctive book? Liberated leadership, freedom plus responsibility equals happiness plus performance.
It links in liberated leadership, and rotational leadership is something that I should talk about all the time. Knowing that you have great ability, you're a brain surgeon. We all know that during an operation, you'd want the best of the best operating on you. However, when you move from that environment into a different environment, as I say, you then might want the best nursing care, and that nurse is then leading the situation. And for me, it's not about labels. It's not about who you are on your business card. It's being able to adapt to being able to follow as well as lead, so that you can use different strengths within your team and there's no kind of ego attached to that. And so for me to be able to rotate leadership in a business is absolutely critical, and to have no ego attached to it. Who's the best person for the job? And animals do that all the time. So when I work with horses, I work with a herd of horses. I know very clearly, and again, my guests or my delegates don't know that there are different strengths in the herd. And I ask them to find those strengths. And there is an alpha female, there is an alpha male. And what really excites me, I ask them who the leader is and why. And most people do go for the big, strong guy who looks impressive to be the leader. And actually, in reality, in nature with horses, it's the alpha female that leads. And she leads on direction of the herd. So she's the oldest, the wisest. She knows how to conserve her energy. So she leads the herd in the direction that the herd needs to go. Whereas the alpha male's strength is in protection. So he's always at the back. So he pushes the herd in front of him so that if he has to, he can turn and fight the prey. But it rotates all the time. And within that herd of horses, you will have horses that are brood mares looking after the young. But there's no ego. There's no, I'm the leader of the group, so you listen to me. It's all done in a very collaborative way, bringing their strengths together for the greater good of the herd.
Oh wow, that's fascinating. Just that dynamic. I didn't know that about horses. Yeah.
And so it goes on, Richard, I could be here for a long time telling all these amazing things that I've learned and sharing with you. And it is extraordinary. I would never have believed that I could work. If someone said to me I'd be working with business and horses, 15 years ago, I would have thought they were the barking mad, But it's the speed that you get to understand what's going on in an organization, that mirror of what's happening is just shown up by what the horses are doing. The boundaries, the energy that you bring, all these kinds of things are explored in the arena and then brought back into the classroom for further discussion and for, to working out what we need to do with that information moving forward.
So you're in and out of the arena. That's presumably where all the horses are.
Yeah, so at the moment I'm working on a year-long program with, I won't tell you who it is, but a big organization. And I work on some of the work, so we'll work outside some of the time. But on a year-long program, I'll probably just have maybe 3 days. And all those wonderful insights that we've brought in together outside in nature will then be brought back into the environment, in the classroom or into the boardroom, to be discussed in different ways by different techniques and different skills and different professional facilitators. So it's the kind of collaborative thing. You can't just do this work in a vacuum. You have to apply the IQ, the EQ, the SQ as well.
Yeah, and apply it to and it sounds like what you're doing here is you're applying it to context. I was reading an article yesterday about leadership development programs and why they often fail, and one of the failure points was a failure to appreciate context. It sounds like that's something you're extremely attuned to.
That's where we start. Context has got to be the main starting point, and you get that from discussing that with the people in the business, and we do one-on-one kind of conversations with them before our program even starts to get the feeling of what the context is. Otherwise, you could be shooting in the dark. You could be trying to work out a problem that you think exists, but isn't the real, the nug of the problem.
Yeah. And what I love about this is so far from here's the curriculum, here are the modules, this is what we're going to go through.
You can go off piste at any time. That's what's so fascinating. And it challenges me because, of course, I can't control nature.
No,
so, if something happens and I immediately have to apply that so in a situation when I'm working with elite sports people, we had a situation where they decided they would bribe the horses with food. So I suddenly found the horses were kind of gone into chaos because suddenly there was the food was in the picture, and I had to suddenly apply what's the learning here? Why would it be, bribing would cause such chaos? And I was able to connect with the fact that I realized that some of these top sporting groups very rarely actually work together for very long. The England teams, they're always play as an England team. And there is all sorts of distractions for them. Lots of money distractions, lots of, better qualities, better clubs that they can go and join, as we know. And so there was a huge learning about bringing in something again from outside, which was this horse food, and in their case, some kind of bribery contracts, whatever, that then opened up a massive discussion about how we work as a team. I don't know whether you can see the parallels there, but it was, for me, I had no idea what was going on. And then I realized, this is what actually happens in these elite sportsmen's worlds. This money and fame and paparazzi and all these things have a massive influence on them.
Yeah. It just reminds me of the story of Leicester City and the English football team who outperformed all of their much more highly paid competitors, right, in the league.
Absolutely.
They found that coherence as a team.
Yeah.
And wonderful. Okay. Well, this has been brilliant, Rosie. I've really appreciated the underlying message, really, as much as the specific insights and the content you've shared and the stories you've shared.
Well, I hope
okay, so go on.
So I hope the listeners have too. I hope that they've enjoyed
it. Absolutely. So again, we'll put a link up to this book, Instinctive: The Power of Natural Intelligence. People can pre-order your forthcoming book, Let Nature Be Your Compass. And if they want to engage you, if they feel like some time with you and potentially your horses would be valuable, where's the best place for them to find you, Rosie?
So they can look on my website, which is n-instinctive.com. So it's a little bit of a mouthful, n-stinctive.com, instinctive.com. Or they can find me under Rosie Tomkins. I mean, I can pop up in all social media, I think. If they want to phone me, can I give a phone number or not? Is that not?
Yeah, go for it.
You can phone me on anytime, 07702 803 321. That's my mobile number. To chat about things or to say, as you've kindly said, my new book is pre-order on Amazon, coming out on the 31st of October. So please look out for that in the bookshops as well. Thank you.